On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, we got Cole Thompson. We're talking the draft. We're talking the big boys up front and what lessons we learned from the Super Bowl. Big Sarge, let's get it popping.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Special show. You got 3 Texans insiders, 3 Texans credential media members, and 3 Texans football analysts. I'm John Hickman. That's Big Sarge. You know, he has a smile and a big hat on. And our friend Cole Thompson stopping by to talk Texans. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you are our first-time listener, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. On today's episode, we'll be diving into our lessons we learned from the Super Bowl. Sarge, it's time to go all in. Me, invest in the offensive line. So we'll dive into that. Also with Cole, it's a draft party with Cole Thompson. I don't know what beer he's bringing. I hope it's not Natty Light. But we'll be talking about late-round options, that make sense for the Houston Texans and opening up with what should Houston do with the number 25 overall pick. If this is your first time, today's episode, I'm all over the place. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. Cole! Let's get it.
Hey, sorry.
Let's get it popping, man. Got a quick question. Number 25 overall pick. The Houston Texans would have liked to be picking at 32, but it didn't work out. This isn't really an elite guard class, which makes me very weary on passing up an elite talent like Tyler Booker. Can't fathom passing him up with a 25 overall pick if he is there. Does that make sense for you if you're the Houston Texans? And should fans really want Tyler Booker with the number 25 overall pick?
Let's start this off with a bang. I don't think Tyler Booker is elite. So let's just start there. I think he's a very, very good guard. I think he's
the elite guard of this class?
Depending on if you have Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks as tackles, which I don't. I have both as guards. Then I would say that he is the next guy up. I think that if you were to move a guy like Will Campbell into guard, you're getting an all-pro type potential immediately from week 1. I think that is plug and play, pulling, mauling, footwork, technique, physicality, everything that you want. The way that Quentin Nelson came to the Indianapolis Colts is the way that you could get a guy like Will Campbell to come into a team and be that immediate impact. Just a forceful fixture on your offensive line. Kelvin Banks, I still believe you could play him at right tackle, and he would be a very solid, serviceable, maybe even Pro Bowl level type tackle. But I do believe eventually at some point in his career, he will shift inside to guard. So if you're already going to have those conversations to where he is going to be a guard, why not just try him out at guard right now? And if he doesn't work out, you shift him back to right tackle or you shift him to left tackle, and he'll be fine because if there's already reps and there's already proven commodities when it comes to them. But I think that when you talk about Tyler Booker, he is the quintessential guard-only guard. If you try him at tackle, if you try him at center, go ahead, take the handout, belt to ass type of feel, because if it's the only way that you can do it, he is a guard. He is a straight guard. There is no other question about it. Good run blocker, exceptional footwork when it comes to winning and run protection. I think he's done a really good job of bettering himself when it comes to hand placement, especially when it comes to pass pro. During his time at Alabama with different quarterbacks from Bryce Young to Jalen Milroe to even a little bit of Ty Buckner for like a game and a half. He allowed 2 sacks and he allowed 9 total pressures. He is the quintessential. You can blame a lot of things that went wrong for Alabama last year. You can't blame Tyler Booker. He was a plug and play, All-American edition, phenomenal when it came to winning. He's a road mauler. And I think for the style of offense that Nick Caley wants to run, that's the fit. That is a really good fit. Now, I personally think that when you get into this 20 to 25 range, if the package is good enough to move back, you should consider those options.
That was a question I wanted to ask you about, like, depending on the players that are available and also depending on how Houston views 18 to 32, those players that'll be around in that pool.
Yeah.
Does it make more sense for Houston to look at, okay, let's trade back. Let's get more picks because they only have 6. which is a little bit of something new for Nick Caserio and his front office staff.
I think the big thing is that where are you moving back to? Because if you believe that the talent level is not going to drop off, and let's just say Tyler Bricker goes at 20 to the Seattle Seahawks, and he's off the board, and you're now at 25, and the New York Jets call, and they want to move up to go get Jackson Dart because they believe that he can now be the quarterback of the future, and they want to get him on the 5th-year option. You move back to 42, you pick up an extra 3rd-round pick in the process, and now you have 4 picks on day 2. Where a lot of the talent from 25 to 42 to 58 in that range, they're all around the same level, but one player is going to have a 5th-year option where the other guys aren't. So I consider that to be a move. And it gives me more draft equity to be able to play around with if I want a guy that's going to be able to be a plug and play for us to move on up later into the back end of round 2 or up into the back end of round or back end of round 3. And those are some things that I look at and I think Nick Caserio is going to consider because of there's 2 things that I know about Caserio. He is always going to want to make trades. And number 2, he wants to add players that can be proven plug-and-play additions from the get-go. John Mechie was supposed to be a plug-and-play addition at wide receiver when they drafted him. They traded up with the Cleveland Browns to go get him. When they went, they brought in Christian Harris. They traded on up to go get him because he was going to be a plug-and-play addition. Tank Dell, traded on up to go get him. Juice Scruggs, he was injured at the very beginning of the year, or he would have been probably the starting center. They went up to go get him. So it's little things like that to when they go and they grab a player, they want them to be a quality addition that's fighting and competing for first team reps. And if you feel like that a guy at 25 is just a little bit of a reach to where you can get the same level of talent or somebody in that vicinity, pick 42, pick 37, pick 39. And again, in a quarterback class where there's weakness beyond belief outside of Shedeur and Cam. Like everybody will tell you that Shedeur and Cam, they have their weaknesses, but they still are plug and play. You can expect to at least see them get a chance to start. Everybody else, we don't even know who QB3 is. Is it Milroe? Is it Dart? Is it Combine? We're going to find out at the Combine in a couple of weeks, but that's really where we are. And if a team has got to move up to guarantee they get their quarterback and you get the right draft capital to move back, I consider that. I really think that I could land a decent wide receiver, a decent interior offensive lineman, a solid interior defensive lineman, pick 37 through pick 42, and then be right back on the clock at pick 58 and get myself the other position.
With that being said, Cole, I know that, John asked about an offensive guard at 25. And for me, and I know there's something we're going to talk about on later shows, I think that they should go and get a wide receiver at 25 if they're going to stay at 25. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, when you look at Nick Caley and the offense that we expect him to run, as far as some of that Sean McVay, some of that old New England Patriots offense, combining those together, you promoted Cole Popovich to offensive line coach.
Great first name, by the way. Great first name.
And you're going to look, getting rid of that zone blocking scheme and implementing a brand new blocking scheme. If you don't get a guard at 25, if you don't trade back and get a guard, couldn't the Houston Texans still pick up a wide receiver, get a guard later on, and maybe insert Kenyon Green back at the left guard position and maybe put in Juice Scruggs at the right guard position to see what they have based on brand new blocking schemes?
We're still doing the Kenyon Green thing. Okay.
I am, because I think that listen, Kenyon Green and this is just me, right?
Okay.
Kenyon Green is great at one thing, bad at another, right?
Okay.
He's a great run blocker. He is a bad pass protector, right?
Yes.
I mean, pass
we'll
blocker,
give you that.
right? And so, but I don't know, has anybody really taught him how to pass block in the NFL? Because even coming out of A&M, one of the things that he had was he can get up the field, get to the second level, open up holes. He opened up holes for Isaiah Spiller. He opened up holes for his A-Chain, right?
Devon A-Chain, yeah.
Devon A-Chain, that 1-2 running back combination. Kenyon Green was part of that. He was a 2-time consensus All-American, right?
Because of his run blocking.
Yeah, because of his run blocking. So that's what I'm saying. If you teach him, if Cole Popovich is able to teach him how to pass block the right way in the NFL, do you think they still need to go and get a guard?
Yeah, they still need to go get a guard. Here's the reason why.
It's 25 is what I'm saying.
Okay, potentially, depending on who the guard is there. Just don't just say we have to take a guard at 25. Booker's off the board. You don't have Banks, you don't have Campbell, and now you're reaching for an Emory Jones or a Gray Zabel, the North Dakota State kid that balled out at the Senior Bowl. Like, don't do that. But yeah, I would still say that guard is probably the number one priority because 2 reasons. Number one, you guys are going to be talking about this later. I don't know if I'll be on the show or not, but Super Bowl lessons. My Super Bowl lesson is if you do not have offensive and defensive line depth, you ain't going anywhere. You are not moving.
Good
you are
offensive
out of the
line
playoffs.
depth.
You are not doing crap. You're not being able to finalize anything because of those are the teams that late in the year, you can put in a 6 offensive lineman, and guess what? You're in a good standing because if he's ready to plug and play. They didn't have Cam Jurgens in the NFC Championship game, and they played Landon Dickerson back at center for the first time since he was in college at the University of Alabama, and they still were able to run the football efficiently with Saquon Barkley. And I believe they have the running back of the future and Joe Mixon, who still has shown you that there is more than enough juice left in the tank for him to be the bell cow back moving forward. So you got to have good offensive line depth. Sarge, we watched as Josh Jones was traded to the Houston Texans for a 4th-round pick, and he was a bust because of just the value of having that depth of the offensive line is so essential. So you maybe don't have to draft him at 25, but you still got to draft him because number two, I'm not going to buy into Kenyon Green anymore. Now, I'm not saying that you don't give him a shot if he's still on the team, but I'm not going to bet my life savings on Kenyon Green to improve with Cole Popovich as a new left guard. And also, I feel okay if you want to move Juice Scruggs there or let Scruggs and Patterson battle it out for center. And if the loser of that job, you go ahead and you bring in and you put him at now right guard. And then if you got to move Titus Howard over to right guard and let Blake Fisher play right tackle because you use a 2nd-round pick on him, that's fine for me too. But that doesn't mean you don't draft a guard. In my opinion, every single year, the 2 positions that you should be drafting, interior offensive line, interior defensive line.
But I'm not saying not drafting a guard. I'm asking at 25.
If you're drafting a wide receiver,
I believe they should draft an offensive lineman. I'm just saying, do you do it at 25? And I know, John, we got to go to the break.
If you're talking about at 25,
yeah, we got to go to the break.
I'm still not taking a wide receiver at 25.
Let's go to the break. When we come back, let's continue that conversation because I do think it gets a little bit interesting. When do the Houston Texans look to take a guard? When do the Houston Texans look to take a wide receiver? And so we'll get to some late round options that make sense and just finish that conversation altogether. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and you get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn helps you with a new feature that can help you create job descriptions and then quickly get your job out in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your research to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find quality hires within a matter of days. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Let's continue that conversation. When should the Houston Texans look to take an interior offensive lineman or a wide receiver? And I think that's important because as of right now, those look to be the 2 weaknesses on the team. Uncertainty with Stephon Diggs, uncertainty with John Metchie and Xavier Hutchinson's future. Tank Dell presumably won't be playing next year. The only guy you can count on in that wide receiver room is Nico Collins. The only guy you can really count on in that offensive line room, Laramie Tunsil to a certain extent, but that whole unit needs to be revamped and needs to add a different element to it. So that's why I asked about and Titus Howard to a certain extent. To a certain extent, I also believe he's very serviceable. I think George Fant played right tackle better than Titus Howard did. When should the Houston Texans look to make an upgrade or to bring in people for either one of those rooms?
First 2 picks for right now. Now, let's just say that they re-sign Stephon Diggs. Let's say they get a deal done and it's a 1-year, $16 million deal. I think at that point, what you could do, because this class doesn't have, in my opinion, a legit wide receiver 1, and you don't need a wide receiver 1 because if you got your guy, Nico Collins, and a really, really, really good 2 when fully healthy in Stephon Diggs, you probably could take it in the 3rd round. I think the 4th round. There's some really
who's out there?
I really like Jalen Royals from Utah State, like at the end of round 3. I think that he is a phenomenal player. I think that he fits that Z position very similar, but have a bit of a bigger frame than Tank Dell does. Great speed. execution when it comes to route running, good at the very top of the top of the base. I think if you want to get a little bit bigger in size, Torrey Horton from Colorado State was an All-American caliber wide receiver in 2023. He dealt with injuries in 2024, which ultimately factored into him missing most of the season, but his catch radius is through the roof. He makes a lot of plays after the catch. He's a big-bodied receiver that has some good straight-line speed. I think Ricky White is the most underappreciated wide receiver in the NFL draft from UNLV. Turn on his tape, and you will see glimpses of some of the fast receivers. I see a lot of Deshaun Jackson in him, where he is miscommunication. He is able to make plays in the line of scrimmage. He does a good job of creating separation, good catch radius, and they're G5 players, but you got to remember that every single one of them started their career out at a Power 4 program. So they were all viewed at one point as guys who could compete with some of the best in the NFL. They didn't do that job, so they went to a smaller school. They became a big fish in a small pond. None of them are going to be round 2 players, in my opinion. If you're going to go round 2 for a wide receiver, the one that fits Nick Caley's system to a T is Jack Beck from TCU, the Senior Bowl MVP.
His name has been flying up a lot of boards.
Quintessential. If you think Puka Nacua and how they were properly utilizing him as a blocker, how they allowed him to play on the outside, they allowed him to play in the slot, bigger bodied, physical frame, not afraid to get in the trenches and be that enforcer, that is the guy. Like that to me is, if I am Nick Caley and I am pounding the table and I get one player to draft, Jack Beck is the dude. And I take him with 58. That's
I do want to ask you a little bit really quick about the wide receivers, because there's a couple of guys. I like the Iowa State duos.
I like both in round 4. I do.
So okay, I really like Higgins, and Higgins reminds me a little bit of right now where he is a polished version of Nico Collins compared to what Nico was coming out. He reminds me of year 2 in the NFL of Nico Collins. Has a limited route tree right now coming out of college, but he doesn't do a lot of wasting of steps at the release. Very big catch radius, finds zones, and gives his quarterback opportunities to hit him in zones where maybe some guys may run into another zone or run into another defender. But a name that a lot of people like, UT guy. This is not me talking. This is just what I'm seeing.
Don't do this.
Matthew Golden.
Okay.
Between 25 and 40. And also Isaiah Bond in that second round as well. And I'll see how his pro day looks in combine. But are those 2 guys that would make sense for the Houston Texans?
Sarge, I'll let you go. What do you want to tell me about Isaiah Bond?
No. I was going to ask the same question about Golden and Bond.
Because Matthew Golden to me is your Stephon Diggs replacement. Like if I had to do a player comp right now,
Buffalo Bills, Stephon Diggs, or Houston last year, Stephon
Minnesota
Diggs.
Vikings getting into his prime, Stephon Diggs. That's what I would say for Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden. So here's the thing with Matthew Golden, and I talked to a lot of people out of Texas about this because of my work with the SEC Unfiltered Network. They thought he was coming back. Like, they thought that he was not going to go pro this year. They figured that he wanted another year to develop, and then he went off in the SEC championship game, and then the Clemson game, and then the Arizona State game, and then he was on path for another 100-yard performance against Ohio State before he got hurt. He was the most underappreciated transfer in college football this past year, because when you look at all the wide receivers that were coming into Austin, and heck, you know this as well as I do, and Sarge, you definitely do too. Isaiah Bond, everyone was talking about him because he came from Alabama. And then they were talking about Silas Bolden because of his speed when he was coming in from Oregon State. And Jonte Cook, well, Xavier Worthy's gone, and now he's going to be the new number 1. He's from DeSoto. He's a good player. And it was like Matthew Golden, he's a special teamer that was at the University of Houston. It's cool. Like, you know, we're going to throw him in there. That's great. And then he balls out, and he's the number 1 weapon for Quinn Ewers en route to a college football playoff semifinal. And every single time that you need a big play, there he was. Good catch radius, good frame.
Good hands.
If you were to take him at 25, I personally would feel a little underwhelmed by it, because of now we're talking about him and Emeka Egbuka is probably the ones that most people are going to be talking about, because if Emeka was a player in that same range like him, I feel like with those 2, they're both quality number 2 receivers. Their floor is a high-end number 3. Their ceiling is a high-end number 2. I have a need at a guard where I can get a lot of good wide receivers who may end up having very similar frames, or maybe higher floors and lower ceilings. that I could take at 58, or I could take it in a trade back. But in a trade back, I'd be okay taking Golden. If you were to move down to say like 32, like let's say Kansas City sees Armand Membo from Mizzou, and they want him to be their franchise right tackle of the future. And you move back and you get a 3rd-round pick and you're at 32 and Matthew Golden's still there, make the move. Do it because you're getting picks in return for it. But at 25, knowing where I am on the offensive line, knowing that CJ Stroud was sacked 54 times last year, the second most in a quarterback in 2024, when you spent the most money on the offensive line, and that is the highest paid offensive line in the NFL per annual salary, I got to protect my quarterback. That's priority number one. But in a trade back, I would be okay taking Matthew Golden. Isaiah Bond, I'm not going to be bought on. I'm like, it's a pet peeve of mine. I think Isaiah Bond is really fast. I think Isaiah Bond is a more nuanced route runner. But in so many critical moments, the drops that were there, the inconsistency when it came to winning in man coverage, I'm not willing to bank on him at 58. If I took him at the end of round 3, I'd be more content with it, but I'm not going to take him at 58.
So, Cole, here we got 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, right?
Yes.
Because if Nick Caley is who they say he is, I watched Sean McVay take a average to not average and below offensive line and still be able to get the best out of it, right? Still be able to get the best out of it. But what he had was Cooper Kupp. He had Puka Nacua, right? When they were both healthy at the same time, right? And so what I'm saying is, if the Houston Texans stay at 25, me personally, I know they need offensive line help. But if Nick Caley is on the same Wi-Fi as Sean McVay, then that offense is going to be able to not have to block for so long, because you're not running 7 to 10 yards to 12 to 15-yard routes.
Sure.
You're giving the wide receivers the freedom to be able to do what they need to do and not just tell them, trust the play, right? And so even if you take a offensive lineman later on, I think that CJ Stroud needs a true number 2 wide receiver. If they don't get Stephon Diggs, you've got to put somebody over there, because we've watched them the last 2 divisional games. The one against the Baltimore Ravens, they did not have a wide receiver number 2, and all the defense did was roll the coverage over to Nico. Against the Kansas City Chiefs, all they did was roll the coverage over to Nico and said, if you're going to beat us, then you're going to have to get the number 2 to beat us. Now, I'm not saying that Golden can come in and all of a sudden you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, I think that you have a quarterback who is competent enough to get the ball out of his hands quickly, but you got to get him a wide receiver too. And I understand there may be wide receivers in the 3rd round that could fill that spot, but I'm looking at some of these wide receivers and I'm saying, yeah, I think that they can start day 1 for the Houston Texans.
Could they? Yes, I will. Okay, humor me real fast.
This is also how it stands. The wide receiver room for Houston is very below average.
Oh, it is 100%. Because if you also have to realize, here's the thing that bothers me when people are saying that Tank Dell could be back in 20. Act like he's not back. Just act like he's out. Act like that you don't have him. And Stephon Diggs is going to Dallas, or he's going to Seattle, and he's going to annoy all of us and not be here next year. So let's just say that. It is one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the NFL because of you don't have a guaranteed number 2. But what if I sold you on this idea instead? What if you were able to land? Let me think. What if you could land here? Humor me. What if you could pull Kansas City? You get a Darius Slayton on a 1-year deal, similar to Marquise Brown. You also get Amari Cooper to come on in on a 2-year deal.
No.
And then you go draft a wide receiver like Jack Beck in the 2nd round.
You lost me on Amari Cooper.
Yeah, because all you're going to do is still roll you know what Amari Cooper would be? Robert Woods.
He'd be that's disrespectful.
He'd be a possession wide. Robert Woods is a possession wide receiver right now. Amari Cooper is a possession. Amari Cooper is a possession wide receiver right now.
That's so disrespectful to him.
Listen, guys.
That's a 4-time Pro Bowler and a 6-time 1,000-yard receiver.
Really?
I think what I was going to say is, what have you done for me lately? And the MVP conversation we had before.
Why are we having the conversation about Cooper Kupp being traded to Houston? What has he done for me lately?
Nobody on this show has brought that up.
I know you're not. I'm hearing Deebo Samuel now from people, and everyone's stressed out.
Nobody on this show has brought that up.
Thank God we're not doing that.
We're going to keep you on for the Super Bowl lessons to learn. The conversation has been rolling and been really fun. So before you go and we end up the show, please stick around. But before we do that, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Somebody got rich over the weekend, and I'm mad it wasn't me. But with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine all of your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new customers over on FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. You got to win to get you to $150. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to join today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Cole, before we look at the Super Bowl lessons really quick, give me 2 names that make sense for the Houston Texans in between round 4 and 7.
Ooh, that's really good. I agree with you on Iowa State, but I really like the other one. I like Jalen Noel.
You like okay. I'm not mad at that. Noel. And he would be a great quote-unquote Tank Dell replacement.
Yeah, I think he plays the Z extremely well. I think he's proven production. The fact that he's built relationships with Rocco Becht, and he was part of a team that got 10 wins this past year out in Ames, Iowa. He's played in some big-time games. That's another thing that I think that we also have to remember is that Nick Caserio goes for guys who have played at bigger programs in bigger games. I think that's a really, really good addition to add to your team as that wide receiver 4, potentially wide receiver 5. That's somebody that you probably really want to target later on in the draft. And then if I was to go with another guy, I think Andrew Makuba from Texas, to add him on in with Kalen Bullock would be really interesting. I think another name that you could throw in there as well at safety, because they're going to have to find a replacement at some point, I think, for Jimmy Ward in the back end. Billy Bowman from Oklahoma comes to mind. He can play in the box. He can play more physical at the line of scrimmage. He's pretty good in man coverage. He does a good job of creating separation against wide receivers while keeping them in front of him. During his time in the Big 12 was one of the better safeties. Last year was pretty good as a transition to the SEC. He's a reliable tackler. That's probably a 4th or 5th round guy that you want to at least bring in for a conversation starter.
Do you like Connor Colby late for the Houston Texans at the guard position?
I don't mind it, but it would be a developmental player. You have to feel really. Here's what I will say: if you could go out and add in a guard on a 1-year deal, or maybe go get a guy, I forget on the Indianapolis Colts, Will Fries, I think is his name. If you could get him like on a 2-year deal for a very team-friendly contract, yeah, by all means, go after him.
Kobe, really quick, Connor Colby, last 2 seasons, only 3 sacks allowed, 4 QB hits. Extremely durable, 40 games in 3 seasons. He's a guy, Cole, like you mentioned. He's an up-and-down guy. He's a project guy. He's kind of like an Austin Deckles, but I think with a higher upside. And so I think that's a positive for Houston. Plays a lot high, actually. Sometimes I see plays where he's not making the contact where he's supposed to be. He is extremely good for zone blocking. And that is something that I think is a positive because I don't think we'll see Houston move completely away from that. And he has some athleticism to him. So he's a guy that decent pull blocker, good combo blocker, handles twists and stunts pretty well. He's a body turner, not a body mover. So when you look at development, just trying to get him to the next level, he's a guy between maybe round 4, 5, and 6. I think Houston would like. Sarge, lessons from the Super Bowl you learned.
Real fast, out of curiosity, do you guys know where he went to college?
Yeah.
Sarge? I went
to No. I know where you went to college. Where Connor Colby went to college.
Iowa.
Automatically, you got to consider him. Just Big automatically. 10. If you go Big to 10, Iowa, you got to be considered. You're on the board.
No, we're not doing this.
Okay, let's for the Super Bowl.
We're not doing this. You know what? You know what, John?
I would take a Big 10 lineman over a SEC lineman. I'll tell you that.
I'm gonna yield my time right now to our guests. Cole, what are the Super Bowl lessons that you learned?
You got to have offensive and defensive line depth. You have to. I think that is just something that is essential if you want to make it that far. And I think that we learned that in the college football playoff, not to go off topic, but the teams that were playing for a national championship had the most depth on their offensive and defensive line, and they didn't miss a beat when a player was injured. They had a starting left guard in the NFL in Donovan Jackson starting at left tackle, and he was doing fine. You had a starting guard play center in the NFC championship, then carried it on over to the Super Bowl in Landon Dickerson. You have to be able to keep your quarterback upright, and you also have to be able to pressure a quarterback. The depth that you saw on Philadelphia's defensive line was a reason why Patrick Mahomes was under duress and under pressure, despite them not blitzing a single time in the game. And the most important part of that is they were able to rotate players. Guys like Josh Sweat, guys like Milton Williams, guys like Brandon Graham, guys
Jalen Hunt.
Jalen
By the
Hunt
way,
Jalen
Hunt was a guy that the Locked On Texan podcast brought up last year, and now he's a Super Bowl champion.
Please don't do this. He my frat brother, so let's not do this.
No, we did. He was on the show.
Thomas Booker.
All of them. All of these guys.
Former Houston Texan.
Former Houston Texan. So much depth is such a big deal for these championship caliber teams. And at the end of the day, what was the difference between the depth of Kansas City and the depth of Philadelphia? One had it, the other one didn't. And they were able to get pressure on the quarterback because of it.
I'm gonna say this, and then, hey, John, hey, look, Cody did do an outstanding job of getting Jalen Hunt, and he went to the pro day. Like, I ain't gonna lie, Locked On Texans was on it. And real quickly, because John, I want you to go next, because I would like to go last if that's okay. Real quickly though, you know what's so funny about the game on Sunday? Like, Kansas City had 2 all-pro offensive linemen, and they were getting whipped, like, on a consistent basis. And that's why I'm like, people complain a lot about the offensive linemen that some of these teams have, Houston Texans, and then, you look at the Kansas City team, and I'm going to be honest with you. The Houston Texans did that exact same thing to that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. John, what did you learn from the Super Bowl?
What happened with the other offensive line, Sarge? What happened when they played? How many sacks?
What offensive line?
Texans. How many sacks in divisional round?
Oh, they gave up 8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my biggest Super Bowl lesson. To be successful in the league, you got to protect your quarterback. Guard your heart. The heart of this team is C.J. Stroud. I mean, of course, you look at the opposite side of the ball, Aziz and all of those defensive players and all-pro Stingley, who doesn't do a lot of talking, but you're not going to go far if your quarterback isn't able to take you far, unless you're a team that has maybe a Saquon Barkley. So you have to – it's imperative for this team with Cole Popovich, with Nick Caley, to get an attitude change, I think, for the Houston Texans, to get a different swagger here for the Houston Texans, to make the scheme easier, and I think that's going to happen for the Houston Texans' current offensive linemen. But they have to be better protecting C.J. Stroud, and I'm going to stick to saying the Houston Texans need at least 2 new starting offensive linemen moving into the 25 season.
I would agree with that, actually.
The Super Bowl lesson that I learned is actually a combination of the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl and the LA Rams winning the Super Bowl. And when the LA Rams won the Super Bowl, what did they do? They said, hey, man, we don't need these picks. Let's go all in. Let's go get whatever we need, and let's go all in, and we don't care about these picks. Here, have them, take them, right? Philadelphia Eagles, right, on Sunday. You look at that, you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar team. Like how many players do they have on big contracts over there? And so the team is like, hey, look, man, okay, cap space, who cares? Whatever. Let's go get the best. We're going to sign the best. We're going to retain the best. We're going to keep the best. So my lesson that I learned is, Nick Caserio, you should have been watching. And then you should have FaceTime Kyle or Hannah while they were at the Super Bowl. FaceTime one of them and say, hey, do you see what they're doing? They got this way because they spent a lot of money, right, on talent. You look at the Los Angeles Rams, they got this way because they went all in on picks. And look, to their credit, we don't know what they're going to be. We do know the Philadelphia Eagles are going to bounce back, and the Los Angeles Rams have maintained. So the lesson that I learned was, Nick Caserio, you need to go all in. You need to go out and you need to find the talent, sign the big name talent, and if it means the money or it means the picks, you got to find some way to get it done, because I know these cap space nerds are going to come and say, Sarge, how are you going to make that happen? Well, how did the Philadelphia Eagles make it happen?
Yeah.
I will say one last thing, though, Sarge, and I'm not disagreeing with you. 100% I agree that they have to go all in. You also have to develop talent, and then once that talent's developed, before they even come close to hitting the market, you better sign them. Because one of the smartest things that Howie Roseman did was he signed Devonta Smith to a cheaper deal when he was good enough and initially up for a contract extension, so that way he could afford to bring in Saquon Barkley. That way he could afford to extend a guy like A.J. Brown. That way he could afford to make sure that he made some moves on the defensive side and then utilize those picks to trade backwards to then eventually move forwards to get himself Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean.
Still got a lot of rookie contracts right now, and they did the same thing with Nico. My bad, John.
No problem. Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. We promise to get Cole Thompson back. We promise to do that because we got more draft coverage to dive into. I'm John Hickman. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12 and make sure that you subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast.
And make sure to follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with a Z at the end.
I'm Mr. Cole Thompson. You can give me a follow there and check out all of our written work found at TexansWire.com.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.